Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vincent, and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be doing something that I've been wanting to do ever since the episode came out, and that is recreating Doctor Strange Supreme from Marvel's What If. Which, whoever came up with the character designs for the show, you need to get a raise. Anyway, making the costume itself was both complicated and not. I'll get into that later. But to start, I had completely forgotten to start recording until I was almost halfway done, till about halfway through the project. So, I'm going to talk you through what I did up until I started recording. Because at least I remembered to take process pictures while I was completely absorbed into the zone. To start off was the robes. I used this simplicity pattern, except I left the sleeves off. Did not even bother to cut them out of the pattern, or the fabric, even. And I left that hole blank. Everything else I sewed together as usual, except for the skirt panels. The skirt panels, I used a basting stitch, so that way they would still have the slits that both the original 2016 movie version and the What If version have on their robes. Then, when it came to the lapels, instead of making them actual frickin' lapels, I turned it to the inside to be facing, and only left the top collar part sticking out. Once that was down, then came the difficult part of this section, which was the applique. It wasn't even that difficult, it was more time-consuming. What I did was I found several references of Steven's original design that he had on his robes in the comics, because that translates over into what he has on his chest in What If. So using that, I drew out about the right size of what I needed, and cut it out of purple fabric, and very meticulously stitched that on to the robes using an embroidery hoop, which, believe me, it does better than you think it does. Once those were on, I used that same purple material and cut a two 2-inch strips, one for each side, and went straight down the front edge. And here's where I tell you something. Because What If is animated, you can't really get a good reference. Because in Steven's episode, and 80% of it, it's dark. You can't see jack diddly squat. Either that or red lighting. Either way, you never really get a good color sample. Even from the promo posters, you don't get a good color sample. So instead, what I ended up using was my Funko Pop. He actually does a better reference than you think, because you get a full 3D reference and decent color swatches. I know that the original Pop design may be slightly different than how it is actually in the show, because if I remember correctly, Funko gets the second concepts that are close to the final designs, but not quite. Anyway, you'll be seeing my Funko throughout the rest of the video every once in a while. Once the robes were that much done, I realized because of my pop, there was a blue strip between the purple and the red. So I used a blue satin finish ribbon, flipped it over to the matte side, and stitched that down very meticulously around the purple. And believe me, there was a lot of pins involved. You will see that later. I took a break from the robes and started working on the cloak. The cloak, I used this pattern. Again, it worked fairly well, except one pattern piece I changed. I did use it, but I changed it. Because in the original pattern, the cloak collar that came with it wasn't quite right. So I took a couple more sheets of printer paper, traced out the main design from the original pattern, and then went over it in what I knew I needed the collar shape to be for Strange Supreme's cloak. You know, the one he stole from the bug. So, once that was together, and once I got it how I needed, I cut it out of craft foam. You're probably confused. I can hear a bunch of you angrily typing already. Believe me. Believe me, I know it sounds weird. But just trust me. Interfacing is expensive as all hell, and craft foam basically does the same thing in this case for a heck of a lot cheaper. 'Cause, yeah. Anyway, once I had the structure of the collar, I used that same pattern piece along with the rest of the pattern pieces that I needed and cut it all out of both the lining and outer fabrics, both of which were cotton, black and magenta-ish purple respectively. Same thing with the robes actually, that was just a burgundy cotton. Again, cheap. Cheap and good quality. So, once all those were sewn together, I had not sewn together the lining and outer part of the cloak yet. I wanted to paint it. And here is where we come in.
I used a silver Sharpie to sketch out the design onto the fabric, and used this fabric paint and started painting it onto the fabric. I used this one in particular because it matched the edge binding that I bought for the outside edge, which you will see here in a minute, but I very quickly realized that one bottle wasn't going to be enough to do 2 coats on both layers. So I bought mine, my first one from Joann's, but the second one I got on Amazon. They were about the same price on both. And I used a hairdryer in between sections to move it along just a little bit faster. And like I said, I did 2 coats of that paint on both the lining and outer part of the cloak. Then I started sewing everything together as you usually would, and added the edge binding using a very small zigzag stitch. And this is what I was talking about earlier with the ribbon. You can definitely see what I'm doing. That's great camera work, Jonathan. You can definitely see through my head. Anyway, what I was trying to say, I went ham with the pins. Obviously here I'm just replacing the bobbin thread. But I used a very small zigzag stitch to go over the blue ribbon. And I know you're not supposed to sew over pins, but I was willing to sacrifice both the pins and a couple sewing needles to get through this. I'm sorry, little one. Oh my god, I'm sorry for that reference. Anyway, using the zigzag stitch, I did both sides of the ribbon to attach it rather than going straight down the middle,
so that way it would actually lay flat and not try to bubble up on itself. I want to say that the robes in their entirety took a couple hours, maybe 6 hours tops, because I did split up the work between multiple days, taking a break in between for the cloak, like I said. So yeah, I want to say this maybe was 6 hours tops, at minimum 4 hours combined. And here is where we are currently. I still have the Eye of Agamotto that I made for my 2016 original Strange costume, which, if you don't know, is the blue robes. The robes have a somewhat hidden zipper, so it's easy for me to put them on without having to argue with a secondary belt that would go underneath this one. Speaking of, for the belt, I originally had planned to use this pattern, particularly this one right here, to make the belt, but I changed my mind, and instead, this is just a 7-inch wide strip of fake leather wrapped around my body form, well, me, to form a belt with the 3 straps, like the pattern, in place to hold it. As instead of having the plain black strip all the way up, or all 3 be the black strip, I opted to go with purple bias tape for the middle and top straps, as per the reference in the show. Now, the blue and gold are actually just crushed penne, or crushed velvet if you want to call it that. I hope I said that right. To make it look more like linen. Because I want this to look somewhat put together, but also like he threw it together out of what he had. Which, it probably is accurate to what he was thinking. If he was thinking at all. My favorite part still has to be the cloak, because in the collar I did add boning into it, so it'll still stand up, but it won't stand up too far to where I can't see behind me. But why the cloak is my favorite is because of how much detail and paint I put into this. This is probably what took the longest. I still have a couple things left to do, because I am trying to determine if I want to leave the bottom hem jagged and cut, or if I want to hem it, because I do want this to look slightly ragged and aged, but at the same time, I don't know. I don't know what I want to do. I'm still trying to figure that out. I still have the arm bracers and the boots left. I think I can do it. This is going to be interesting. When it came to the arm bracers, I made my own custom pattern because the one I had originally planned to use just wouldn't work, and I cut that out of both the fake leather, the same one that I used for the belt, and craft foam, because I had originally planned to paint this, as you can see here, as you can see on screen now. But I realized that I wanted to use fabric to cover it, and I wouldn't know if you would see the paint underneath it, so I did decide to completely go through and paint one of them, but I left the other one mostly white to see if you could actually tell a difference, and for the most part, you can't. So I just completely ditched painting the second one, and I started gluing fabric over top of it. And just to make sure it would lay flat and see how it looked, I used a test strip, and then I mistakenly cut out a piece before I started gluing. That was a mistake. I should not have done that, but that's how we learn. So after that flub, I decided to just take the full-on sheet of fabric and to start hot gluing the crap out of it onto the arm bracer, and trying to get it as flat as I possibly could, which may have been easier said than done because there are still a few bumps, but luckily you can't see them on screen too much. Once I had those, I glued the fabric to the inside to form a sort of barrier or a hem to the inside of the gauntlet, so that way it actually wouldn't look like a random raw edge and it would actually fold in on itself. Then I used the same black leather that I used for the base structure of them, and I used that to create the details of what would have been the carved out sections of the metal. I did the same thing on the right hand gauntlet, on the right hand bracer I mean, but with an added purple strip. This said purple strip was actually a cut piece from a thing of bias tape that I bought along with the gold for the cloak, because I originally planned to use the bias tape rather than the purple strip for the robes I did earlier, but oh look, you can see I'm watching episode 8 in the bottom. Anyway, that's what I started doing, and this is what I was talking about with the purple strip. It is just a little piece of bias tape that I hot glued in place. I want to say that this is maybe the most detailed part, but I could be entirely wrong. I'm still thinking that the cloak is the more detailed part just because of how big it is, but this is probably the second most detailed, the third being the eye, but I already had that, so I didn't have to make that for this specifically. I forgot to mention I used a cream-colored, almost white zipper that was an all-purpose zipper, not a separating one, because a separating zipper is really hard to do one-handed. So I used this all-purpose 7-inch zipper cut down to the right size, and I used that to close it, which you can see, but I don't really care too much. It's really easy to edit out of photos. And here they are, finished! And this, my friends, is where things get lengthy, because I have to put on 3 different wig caps because my hair is unruly and will continue to poke out and be a mess even with the wig caps on. So once I put on a mesh one, then my original plan was to use spirit gum and crepe hair, but I don't think it turned out as it was supposed to. It very quickly went downhill because I have no idea what the heck I'm doing when it comes to stuff like this. So I applied it and thinking it was going well, and soon realized that it was not going as planned, so I took it off and went with my original idea of my Doctor Strange makeup. Oh look, the wig! Then I tracked down my foundation, and once... Jonathan, get off the phone. Get off the phone, love. There you go. Then fuddle with the wig, put on a little bit of foundation before realizing I have to take the wig off. Then apply the foundation, blend it out with the sponge, yada yada, you know the drill. Where the hell did I put my... I know I had it, I just had it. Where did it go? Where did it go? Anyway, apply a little bit more foundation because I had not fully covered yet. Blend it into my neck. That I know it's not this one. It's not, there's hardly anything in this one. What the fuck? Hold up, this isn't right. This is not the right one. Hold up, wait. Found it. I applied transparent face powder to dry the rest of the foundation the rest of the way because it was still moist. Moist foundation is never good. Then the contouring, because Cumberbatch has some very deep cheekbones. Those were first. It's complicated and time-consuming, but it's worth it in the end. The cheekbones only get deeper with Strange Supreme, so I don't know why I'm complaining. Then contour the temples. and my chin, which you won't see much of with the goatee, but whatever. Then taking a little bit, work on the brows, and then underneath my eyes, and finally thinning out my nose a little bit, which does absolutely nothing, but it works, so screw it. Then use brown eyeshadow to fill in my eyebrows just a little bit, not too much, but just a little bit. Use a touch of black to accentuate that a little bit. Then go back to the brown and start filling out where the goatee is going to go. I have a very odd way of doing this, but it works, so what the hell. Well, I need to touch up on the sides for a second. Blend, blend, blend. There we go. And once that is completely filled in to my liking, I used black eyeshadow again and a very thin eyeliner brush to fill in the individual hairs. This is what makes it actually look real without having crepe hair, because I still have no idea how the heck that works. So this takes a while, but it's worth it in the end. I wanted to try using an eyebrow and eyeliner pencil also, but it didn't work. You could barely see it, so I just ditched that plan. Use setting spray. Hold on. Got the fan. Use setting spray to pat that down. Fan. Realized I took off my makeup, so I gotta reapply the foundation on my lips. Touch up the goatee a little bit more since the towel took some off. Then use the brown eyeshadow, eyeshadow first. And use the purple and the black because the Funko Pop has the purple eyeshadow, but in the show it's more black. So I combined the two, and it actually makes it look like he's been sad for centuries, which is exactly what I'm going for. Then taking brown eyeshadow to fill in the fake hairline, and using black to fake the sideburns. And then on to the reveal. And so he's done. About time. Because at the time of recording this, I have about 2 days before the new episode, before the season finale. I'm not ready. But at the same time, I kinda wanna see my boy. So, I'm excited, but I'm not ready. Anyway, I did add some things that aren't quite canon, but in my case they work. Can't tell. It's kinda obvious what I added. But I have reasoning. For one, why wouldn't he have fangs with all the creatures he absorbed? To me, it feels like that would be a permanent side effect of what he did, and that won't go away even if he doesn't summon the wings and tentacles on his back, and that really cool looking third eye. But besides that, there are some things that I want to change. For example, at the moment I am using a pin blank and a safety pin attached to suspenders underneath the robes to hold the cloak. That really isn't the best thing because the back of the pin blank has tried to detach itself and go flying across the room twice. Not fun. And I did decide to leave the bottom edge of the robes completely unhemmed. Because, like I said before, I want it to be ragged and aged. Because he spent centuries absorbing those creatures. So I kind of want it to look it. You know what I mean? And there are some other things I need to add to it too. Like, perhaps getting a better wig because this is my fluffy yarn wig. Even then, I still kind of like it. And maybe get better with working with the spirit gum and the crepe hair because his goatee is a little bit pointed and I can't do that with my makeup look. As much as I've tried, I can't. My chin doesn't do that. I'm not a Disney villain as much as I want to be. But besides that, I think this turned out really well. And I think I enjoy it. This will definitely get added to the bunch. But with that, I bid you adieu. Until we meet again. With both of which were fun. Out of both the...